Welcome, everyone, and welcome to our session today on union cooperatives. And we're taking a look at CoOp Cincy and their 10 years of experience with union co-ops. This is the second in a series that Cooperation Works is sponsoring on cooperatives and unions. And the first session was back on March 21st. That recording is available, and that was on the basics of what is a union. Today, we will look at union co-ops. Coming up next Friday, April 22nd, Rebecca Lurie will be joining us, and she will share her toolkit on union cooperatives. And then rounding out this series on May 17th, we have Gem City Market in Dayton, Ohio, sharing their model of a multi-stakeholder cooperative and how they are progressing to ownership and their neutrality towards union organizing amongst the workers of that particular co-op. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker. We're very fortunate to have Ellen Vera here with us from CoOp Cincy. Ellen is the Director of Development and Co-op Organizing. She was also the co-founder of CoOp Cincy and a One Worker, One Vote. She helped launch CoOp Cincy's education arm called Coop U. And prior to joining CoOp Cincy, she was the national organizing coordinator for the manufacturing arm of the Communication Workers of America. And she was the lead organizer for the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 75. Ellen holds a master's in business administration from Northern Kentucky University. And she is also part of a family with mixed immigration status, which helps explain her passion for immigrant worker issues along with people of color and their inclusion in worker co-ops and union co-ops. So I would also like to share that this session is being recorded. If you have questions, type them into the chat. And when we come to the end of our presentation, we'll go through some of those questions and we may open up the lines to have a more free-flowing discussion. So without further ado, Ellen.
Thank you so much, Margaret. And thank you guys all for having me here today. I do apologize if I have a little bit of coughing or raspy voice. I've had COVID the past couple of days, so I'm starting to get over it. But I'm really happy to be here today. I'm really excited to share with you guys what our experience has been at CoOp Cincy. It's been hard to believe, but 10 years already that we've been working on forming union worker co-ops here in the US. So I'm going to share some slides and I'm going to share a bunch of information, but I definitely want to make sure that I'm giving you guys information you guys are most interested in. So please don't hesitate to put things in the chat and I'll try to make sure I leave enough time at the end to have some discussion. So let me get my screen up. Okay. Can folks see that okay? Okay, great. Okay. So you guys heard a little bit about me. I did spend 11 years in the labor movement before I became a staff member of CoOp Cincy. I am one of the co-founders, and for, I guess I would say, maybe the first 6 to 8 years, I was doing both co-op organizing and union organizing side by side. So I want to give you a little bit of background on CoOp Cincy. So we were founded in 2011. We currently have 13 different co-ops in our organizations, everything from childcare to farming, to construction, to kind of food and cleaning and different things like that. So we've got a whole array of different types of co-ops. And we do a whole bunch of different types of services. So we'll kind of be going into some of this, but in addition to creating new co-ops, which we do through our co-op development arm through CoOp U, we also transition existing businesses to worker ownership through our Business Legacy Fund program. And then once those businesses are in our network, we provide a whole lot of ongoing technical assistance, kind of in perpetuity. And we also have a loan fund that helps to support all of our co-op businesses. I'm going to go through some of our co-ops right now that are currently affiliated with unions or on kind of the pathway to be affiliated. So our Harvest Farm and Food Hub is the first co-op that we formed. They have about 10 to 14 workers, again, founded in 2012. Just an awesome co-op that is really bringing together both, honoring both land and labor, and they are union with United Food and Commercial Workers Union. We also have the Synergy Cooperative. They are a home insulation cooperative, and they're just getting into solar right now. They were founded in 2014 and currently have 8 to 10 workers, and they are also union with the steel workers. We have Cincy Cleaning Cooperative. They are led by a group of Guatemalan and Mexican immigrants, launched in November of 2019. Currently have 3 full-time workers and 2 part-time workers, and are working to be unionized with the steel workers as well. And then we have Shine Nurture Center, which is a childcare co-op that just recently transitioned to worker ownership. They have a total of 12 staff, 5 worker owners to start, and they are probably going to be unionizing with the teachers union. And then we have a whole bunch of other labor partners that our co-ops are not currently a part of, but that are very much deeply connected to us, that we've done different things with over the years or are currently doing things with. So, for example, the AFL-CIO here in Cincinnati, the head of the AFL sits on our board and has for almost since the beginning of our organization. We've also done strategic campaigns, kind of strategic kind of co-op development alongside campaigns with IUE-CWA and with the teachers union, and have done different things with AFSCME and SEIU as well. Okay, so now I'm going to really get into kind of the nitty-gritty of kind of why we really believe in union co-ops, and kind of what is the impetus for us of why we feel like this is an important part of our co-op development kind of formula. So oftentimes people will say, well, why do you need a union if you guys are the owners of the business? Why do we want to have a union as a part of this co-op, the workers themselves, right? This is a democratic workplace. So what we found, and I would say what we've also, this has kind of been based on what Mondragon has found, one of the most successful group of worker-owned businesses in the world, is that they really found that they needed to have this space, kind of this labor committee, this space where people could work through a lot of the issues that were going on inside the business, making sure there was kind of reinforcing structures to be able to kind of truly live out their values. And so that's what we've really seen, like they mandate within any of their co-ops that have over 50 people that they have this essentially what is a union committee or a labor committee. They call it the social committee within Mondragon. But it really helps that co-op to scale with their values by having that collective bargaining agreement where we're really spelling out the wages, the benefits, the working conditions. It's very clear for everybody kind of what that looks like. And so the other thing is that, we know democracy is always something that we all really value and that we aspire to, but we also know that democracy can sometimes oppress a minority group within the whole, right, within the majority. And so making sure that democratic work environment can be balanced out. So this might be that you've got a whole bunch of guys in a co-op and maybe they don't want to give that promotion to that woman that's in that co-op, or a variety of whole other different things that can happen. So just making sure that we have checks and balances, and that even though we are democratic workplaces, that we're really truly living out our values to the fullest. Another thing that's been really important for us. Yeah, go ahead.
Could you speak a little more slowly for the interpreters?
Yeah, yes, I can. Yes. So another important piece is improved access to affordable benefits. So for our co-ops that are union, they're able to get access to health and welfare funds. So having healthcare plans that they would never be able to access without being a part of that union. So these unions are able to go and negotiate down prices and get really good health and welfare plans because they have so many workers that they bring together. So that's something that a lot of our co-ops have been able to benefit from because them on their own would not have been able to get those types of plans without being a part of that union. Some of the other reasons why we feel like union co-ops are really important. So we know that, kind of one of the elemental things that we're doing when we create a co-op is we're trying to create a different relationship, right, within that sector. We're trying to create more power for those workers and improve working conditions. However, one co-op on its own is not going to be able to completely change an industry, right? So that co-op may want to pay the highest wages it possibly can, have the best benefits. But if they are not able to change how that industry is interacting, right? If they're not able to change the standards in that industry, there's going to be a ceiling they're going to hit. They're not going to be able to do more because they have to be able to be competitive. So being directly connected to the labor movement, where you have a whole group of workers, a whole movement, right, that's pushing to increase wages and benefits and working conditions in that industry, they're able to be a part of a broader movement to try and help improve their jobs as well. And something that they wouldn't be able to do on their own. So being part of that kind of platform to act in solidarity with other workers. And, you know, there's oftentimes lots of different issues and policy concerns that the different workers may feel, you know, and carry within their co-op, but don't always have the time or the energy, or even that co-op network might not have the time or the energy to truly do the advocacy that they want to do on those issues. And the union can be a platform for that as well. Here's a little bit of the structure. Yeah, I'll keep trying to slow down. Thank you, Margaret. So here's a little bit of a picture on the structure, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later. But I wanted you guys to kind of get a sense in your mind, you know, kind of what this looks like. So picture this big circle on the outside. This is the whole business, right? This is the co-op itself. You have all the workers, right? And that outer circle, everybody is inside that. Then as you come to the inner circle, you have the worker owners. So the folks that have decided to become owners of the business. From those worker owners, typically they're electing a board of directors. And the hat that these folks are wearing is they're thinking about the strategy, right? They're thinking about the long-term plans for this business. They're thinking about how are they going to make sure that this business is really going to that next stage or is staying on track to what they're doing. Typically, the board of directors appoints a management team, and that management team is about thinking about the day-to-day operations, right? How are we going to make sure that these plans that we're developing are coming to fruition? What needs to be done today, tomorrow, next week to make sure that we are achieving those goals and keeping us on track? And then you have the union committee. And so this union committee is also elected from both the workers and the worker owners. So the collective bargaining agreement, the union committee is representing both workers and worker owners. And so this is the space where we're working on, you know, interpersonal issues, where we are really thinking about what is it like as a worker in this business? What are my wages like? What are the benefits like? What is it? Is our work being organized in a way that is very ergonomically safe for folks? Issues like this is what is kind of being talked about and being considered within that union committee. And again, we're representing both the workers that are not and worker owners, as long as they're not kind of that person or that group of people that can hire and fire. So we'll get into this a little bit more later on, but I wanted to give you guys an initial picture. So now we'll talk a little bit about kind of what we've learned as we've worked to form union co-ops. So it starts with the foundation. So oftentimes people who have reached out to us over the years, you know, will say to us, okay, we want to form union co-ops too, but we reached out to the labor person that we know, and there just wasn't a lot of interest. Or, you know, I had one phone call, I reached out one time and nothing happened. Well, one thing that we think is really important, and one thing that we were doing to try and, you know, before we got started, was to really build deep relationships within the labor movement. So it's important that, you know, this is not a one-way street, right? So this is something that, you know, it's something that is important to happen over time. And it's important that we're not just, you know, saying, hey, we want you to be a part of our movement, but that we are also reaching out and going to be a part of their movement. So this might mean, you know, showing up to that picket line, or going to that protest, or really understanding kind of what's going on, going to their central labor committee meetings. So making sure that that is something that is a priority and that is something that you work on over time. It's not just a one-time thing, and trying to really build that understanding. The next piece I would say is that building a dedicated team built on trust and core values. So in Cincinnati, we studied the model for about a year, got together a group of folks who were coming from the labor movement, from the peace and justice movement, from the immigrant rights movement, and really made sure that we were strong as a team before we got started. And we knew that we wanted to create union co-ops, that was important to us. Sorry, hold on one second. The other thing that we did early on was we created a foundational nonprofit that was committed to creating this network of union worker co-ops. That'll help me slow down, right? So this was really important because it allowed us to get different types of funding for our co-ops and have the kind of the goal and the plan that we knew this was like long-term what we were trying to do. Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm going to pop in a cough drop.
Certainly understand. Yeah, COVID is going through her family right now. She's got small children and yeah, not easy to deal with. So certainly understand. And we certainly appreciate the time that you're taking, Ellen, to speak with us, even though you're not feeling well.
I appreciate that as well. But yeah, hopefully we'll be able to keep going without too much interruption. Okay. So the vision. So as many of you guys probably know, back in 2009, the steelworkers in Mondragon made this historic agreement to say, hey, they wanted to create union worker co-ops here in the United States, that they really recognized within each other the power and the importance of what each other brought. And since there was this kind of social committee in the Mondragon co-ops, at that point when they had been formed, unions were completely illegal because of Franco having taken over the dictator. And so they created this social committee that acted essentially as a union. But as they thought about, okay, let's bring this to the United States, they realized that having this partner with the labor movement was kind of the key to kind of make that part of it continue to expand that part of their model. So CoOp Cincy was essentially the first organization in the US to truly bring that agreement to life. So what I would say for us, the vision of Mondragon being directly connected to them has been really important, I think, in the development of our network. It's really important, I think, especially as you're talking to labor folks. They're dealing with typically, thousands, hundreds of thousands of workers. And so sometimes when we talk about co-ops and we think about the typical size of a co-op, it seems really small for a lot of unions. So I think being able to speak to what has been able to be achieved, where you have over 100 different co-ops, over 80,000 workers that are in co-ops that have really been able to transform, a whole region. It's something that can really speak to what's the true power of being able to really bring this model to life. And so that has been very helpful for us to be able to try and help the labor movement get a sense of the potential there, right? If we truly invest in this, if we truly do this to that type of a scale, this can have a very transformational impact. The other piece that we feel like is really important coming from the learning from Mondragon is what we kind of call the trifecta. So they've done a really great job of, alongside these co-op businesses, creating, access to financing. They have their own bank, and education. They have their own university. So that's something that we have taken very seriously at CoOp Cincy, and that's why we now have our own loan fund and we have our own education arm that's working to really truly kind of bring this co-op culture to life and help to create new co-ops. The other thing I would just say is that, as we all know, this is not easy work. Building co-op businesses, building any startup business, right? in general is very hard. And so just persistence is key. And I think one thing that's, been exciting for me is, we had so many of these visions and dreams early on to start to see some of these start to come to fruition. Now that we're 10 years in, I think it's been really exciting, but it's not been easy, as all of you guys know. And so just continuing to keep that vision in mind to kind of know where we're going, and have kind of that vision of what we're building to has been super important to keep us on track. And then in addition to the vision is really taking action. So one thing I really appreciate about the folks who've been involved with and engaged and around CoOp Cincy is, we're all about like going out and trying to make it happen. So building the road as we go, not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, and just really getting started. And then the last thing I'll say on the vision is that interconnected network of co-ops is also critically important. We're really starting to see our co-ops start to really support each other, build off of one another. Sometimes workers, if one co-op is, needs to lay off some folks, they can go work in one of the other co-ops, referring to one another in terms of clients. So it's something that, I think in terms of just not having just co-ops out on their own, but being interconnected can be really powerful. And it's also, though, important to think about, though, not to create too much structure than is what is needed for at that time. So again, kind of building the road as we go. Sometimes we can get bogged down in trying to put together kind of that perfect structure, and it can keep us from moving forward. So we always recommend you want to have enough of that forethought, but not so much that you're not getting moving and getting things happening and getting things on the ground. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about actually starting the businesses and the process that we use to do that. The first thing as we think about this is just being really thoughtful about the industries and kind of the approach that we want to go with in terms of starting up a new business or a new co-op. CoOp Cincy started off doing a whole lot of startups. Part of that was, because we were new at this, but also part of it was our access to capital at that time. We're now doing a whole lot more in conversions. We feel like both are really important, that, there's going to be times where the market, you cannot find that right business already that's going to want to become a co-op. And you're going to have people who are very passionate and have great ideas, and startups are really important. But another thing that we've been kind of working on and thinking about lately is, as we think about scale and our area of the country in Cincinnati is almost exactly the same size as the area in Mondragon. We have 2.3 million, they have 2.1. So we want to see, 80,000 people in Cincinnati employed, right, in co-ops. How are we going to get there quickly? So we've been doing much more on conversions in terms of trying to get to scale. And the other thing I would say is, as you're working with labor, that is probably where you're going to get a little more traction oftentimes, because of they can see more of the vision about how you're going to get to scale quicker. But again, both are super important. In terms of partnering with labor, the earlier you can do this, the better. And this can take on many forms. So as I mentioned, we started that nonprofit in the beginning, early on, and we brought onto that board right away. We had 3 or 4 labor partners that were on that board. And we were very thoughtful about which industries we were starting to build co-ops in. It was the industries that we had deep relationships with these labor partners with, because we knew that we wanted to deepen that relationship. So for example, I worked for United Food and Commercial Workers. Our first co-op was in food and farming. We also had one of the former head of the building trades was on our board, and he had gone to Mondragon several years in the 80s and the 90s, and had been so inspired. And so he kind of kicked off the movement, 25 years ago in Cincinnati. And so he was one of the initial ones that we wanted to make sure we were trying to do more in the building trades. And so Sustainergy was, again, one of the first ones that we started working on. And then, of course, manufacturing was also really important to us because of that partnership with the steelworkers. And that one we're still working on, but we do have a couple in the pipeline in terms of conversions that hopefully will come to fruition this year. Some other just ways in which partnering can happen with labor. So it can be, essentially in that just that representation and the benefits. So, like I mentioned, each of our co-ops that are a labor partner, have that collective bargaining agreement, have access to the healthcare funds, potentially the pension. It can also be around strategic campaigns. So in Cincinnati, we were, privileged to be able to partner with the teachers union and some local community organizing groups to work on. They were working to, increase the labor standards for childcare workers. And so as a part of that, while they were doing the traditional organizing, they were trying to organize new shops. They were trying to organize existing, parents and childcare providers and staff to really push to make sure that, they were getting paid living wages. We were helping to create a proactive model, an example of like, this is the type of business we want to have. So as a part of a strategic campaign, and we've had a couple other ones that have been similar. Some other examples is, labor unions can, when the resources are there, provide staff, so kind of lend staff to a project and or resources. I was able to work, part of my time as a union organizer on creating union co-ops. So I was, at the, but, it was a donation from my local to pay for my time to do that. And we've had times where, different labor unions have given a grant towards co-op development, or been able to kind of help bring resources or information about an industry that we're trying to go into. And then last but not least, I'll mention around IDing potential conversions. So another thing that we've spent some time on is creating more of a, I would say, an early warning network, training up some of our local union staff around how to recognize if one of the shops that they currently represent have, they could be sold, soon, or they are at risk of going under. So recognizing if that owner is older or if they're not really investing, in their equipment and things like that, to try and let us know as a partner ahead of time so that we can, help them put together a plan much earlier on and potentially help those workers buy that business and also maintain that shop long-term for that union. So these are some different ways that, partnering can happen with labor, for example. I want to talk a little bit about, again, the nitty-gritty of bringing these things to life. So the most important thing that I'm sure no one's going to be surprised about, but is that the team is the key thing to making a business be successful, a co-op business. And really thinking about, any co-op business, any of these things are really hard. So do we have the grit? Do we have the passion? Do we have the flexibility to truly bring this business to life? Things are constantly changing. The plan doesn't work. Are people able to deal with that change? Can we pivot? Can we change so that we can keep this thing alive and help it thrive? This kind of gets back to that same thing, but what's the tolerance for risk? We've had some different folks in our co-ops where it hasn't been a good fit because of where the business is, and it just is too stressful sometimes for some people. And also really thinking about having kind of that balance of people with actual industry experience, having some of this expertise depending on what you're getting into, but also having folks who really fit in terms of attitude and values. Sometimes you can train up some of that industry knowledge or those skills that people need, but you can't always kind of train people. You can, but it can be harder to really get them to embrace the full value of what you're trying to build. So having that balance. So here's a little bit more of kind of the step-by-step. So from, I would say, our first 5 years of doing co-op development, we had a lot of learnings. We did a lot of things that we did well and a lot of things that we didn't do very well. And so kind of out of that, we have been kind of perfecting and really trying to come up with a clear way to help groups kind of go through that development process as quickly and as effectively and as efficiently as possible. And so we developed this 3-month training. We call it CoOp U. And it's helping teams to, develop these union worker co-op businesses. It's based on lean startup principles. So if any of you guys know lean startup, it's very much based on hands-on, getting out there and trying things out as early as possible versus sitting down and writing out a really long business plan before you've really tested something. And then it also incorporates insights and practices from Cylon, which is Mondragon's premier cooperative incubator. So we were very lucky to have one of the staff members of Cylon, who'd been there for over 16 years, spend a full month with us in Cincinnati, and then additional months corresponding and helping us kind of bring into the key insights and practices that they had learned over their years of developing co-ops. So, and then in addition to that, our CoOp U course, involves weekly training. So we meet usually 2 to 3 hours a week. There's one-on-one mentoring outside of that. And then we also support kind of the financial modeling and the financing, when we can, when it's done. So here's just a little bit of a picture of how that looks. But again, starting off with customer discovery and understanding the problem. Like I said, we do lots of interviews or kind of come up with that minimum viable product, right? That MVP, get out there and test and come back and refine and experiment, but really try to get to something that's workable to start with. And so then, we have templates to help people kind of figure out their cost structure. And then after they've really kind of come up with kind of their full business plan and their full financial kind of plan, then it's about how do we make sure we're kind of putting in all the pieces around co-op governance and participatory management. And then we kind of weave in throughout all of that, co-op education as well. So now we've got a co-op, right? We formed our co-op. What happens next? Some of the things that we've learned around building the business. So many of these things, I'm sure, are not, it's not rocket science, but it's definitely things that, we've had to live it, to learn it. But to really balance ideals with financial sustainability, that, we may want to pay, really good wages in a certain industry. And we may be able to get there, but we also have to make sure that we're doing it in a way that can work for the business. Because if there's not a strong business, there's not going to be those ideals, right, that we're living to achieve. So making sure that we do that, being careful around projections and the amount of debt that a co-op can sustain. We learned this the hard way, definitely with our first co-op, of wanting to be really careful about ownership. And so not wanting to take on, at that point, we didn't really completely understand the ways of taking on equity without giving them control of the business. So put way too much debt on our first co-op, and which really weighed it down. So being really careful about that, and making sure that, one, you're starting off small enough that a business can truly get its feet under itself, and then kind of, keep iterating and going back and making it that much better, that much bigger and stronger. But making sure that you're not, taking on too much debt to really try to get somewhere too quickly, and then, weighing that business down. Another key thing is just really building financial literacy and business literacy within the co-op team. So, we've had folks in our co-ops that, have as much of a master's degree with folks that have like maybe a 3rd grade education. And so how do we together in our co-op business talk about, what is going on financially, how the business is doing, and how do we truly live out that democratic, co-op, how do we really bring that to life? And so a piece of that is making sure that everybody really understands, right, what's going on. And so using the right tools to do that. For, a lot of our businesses, we use something called the Great Game of Business in terms of open book management. I'm sure many of you guys have heard of that, but, kind of turning into a game, right, kind of how this business works, and making sure that everybody understands kind of what I do every day, how that affects the bottom line. But once our co-op business is formed, and I would say kind of getting everything together. So in all of our co-ops, we have union neutrality language. So this is language in their bylaws that spell out that, the co-op's not going to do anything to, to try and to kind of keep the workers from forming a union if they so choose. That they're going to kind of, stay out of it and let the workers decide whether or not they want to form a union. And that they're also going to use a process called card check to accept a union if that's what the workers decide to do. So card check, and you guys may have heard this, in your last meeting, but card check is essentially saying that we don't have to go through a National Labor Relations Board regulated election in order for the co-ops, in order for the workers to form a union. That we can just have, workers can just sign a card, and then you could have a third party check and say, yes, the majority of the workers in this business have voted through their card that they want to form a union. And the reason we do this, some people might say, well, why not have an official vote, right, to bring this union in? But the reality is that the process is broken. The process in our country about people being able to form a union is very broken. It takes a long time. There's lots of red tape. So we could go through that if we wanted. But we found that to really start on a foundation of trust, and that this is a different type of relationship. This is more about solidarity versus us versus them. That using card check neutrality, which is what most unions would request anyways, is a much better place to start off. We also work to do education on labor history and labor co-op history, making sure that people understand what the union is and kind of what the history is going way, way back about unions and co-ops together. We will help facilitate meetings between unions and co-ops. So like as that co-op is kind of starting to be ready to, to form a union within their co-op, helping them know who they need to talk to, who to get connected to, we help with that. And then we also have a lead union steward within our network that can help orient people as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about building the culture. So I've said some of these things, but again, if we're going to truly live out these democratic businesses and that true, spirit of being a worker co-op, we really need to build that culture and that solidarity. So the way that we do this at CoOp Cincy is we have what we call regular team meetings. We meet usually every week to every other week with our co-op teams. We go in and help to facilitate, a meeting where we're going over things like, the history of these, of unions and union co-ops, communication skills, conflict management skills, leadership skills, financial literacy, business literacy, helping them to build their skills so that they can be a really strong team. We also meet regularly with their management. So helping, having a regular meeting with their management team around what are their goals, what are the challenges they're experiencing, what are the things that we need to do to help them kind of, become the best and strongest co-op they can be. We also facilitate retreats for our co-op teams, typically once or twice a year. And then on each of our co-ops, there is one seat that is the CoOp Cincy board seat. And this is just to kind of make sure that, well, to do a couple of things, but one is to make sure that the co-op is staying aligned with the values of the network, but also just to kind of bring that expertise to connect them to different resources and things, and just really keep them strongly a part of the network. A little bit about how we do our team meetings. So we always start with some type of personalized check-in, trying to first remind ourselves that we're all people first, and then, come in with whatever challenge or different thing that we're working on. So I mentioned some of these things, but the topics are individualized to the co-ops. So typically in that either management meeting or in that team meeting, we'll brainstorm with them. What is it we want to learn about next? What of the different, pieces of our model, do we want to dig in more on? We also have a little bit of a passport type thing where we kind of check off, okay, we've gone through these different, skills or topics. And just making sure that we have a regular meeting schedule as much as possible. As some of you guys may know, we have published our own curriculum for kind of building this, this union co-op culture within co-ops. And so it's called the WOW book, and it's a worker owner workbook, or the Manual del Trabajador Socio. So if people want to check that out, it is published on Lulu. And, it's got tons of great activities and different things in it that can be really helpful when trying to build, good co-op culture within your co-op. So yeah, so those are some of the, the chapters, but we go over co-ops in there. We go over Mondragon. We go over labor, the union co-op model, financial literacy, and then just kind of some general things around cooperativism and solidarity. And again, it's a guide. We don't always go through it like front to back with our co-ops. So now we're going to dig in a little bit more to the structure. So when it's time for that kind of co-op to form a union, we typically wait till there's at least 3 workers or 2 workers and a board or a manager. We try to make sure that we're, picking a labor partner that really makes sense. So that might be based on the industry that the co-op is in, or based on the relationship that's there and the understanding of the model. And like I said, we have people sign cards. Then those cards are validated if needed by a third party, but oftentimes, that co-op board will just be like, well, yeah, we believe you. We know the majority is signed. And then we negotiate the contract. And, typically kind of go through step by step, kind of what are the wages, what are the benefits, what are the working conditions? How do we deal with challenges and issues within the co-op? Is there a grievance process? All those types of things. So kind of on a day-to-day basis, what does the union co-op committee look like? So I would say what's really different in our co-ops around the collective bargaining agreement is that typically when you have a collective bargaining agreement negotiated, it is much more of a combative situation. There's not a lot of transparency. You don't really know what the company is making. And so you're coming from, both sides are typically coming from a place of distrust. I would say very differently, very oppositely within our co-ops so far. It's really been negotiated transparently and collaboratively, where we're having clear conversations, about where the business is financially, where we want to go in terms of wages and benefits. And, typically it's a conversation like, well, how can we pay the most we possibly can, right? But not making sure that the business can still be strong. So our collective bargaining agreements have been, very, I would say, flexible where they need to be. Again, we've been able to get access to union benefits, which has been really important. Even things like, some of the unions have access to like free online college, for that union member and anybody in their family. So things like that, have been just, great things that workers can be excited about. And this space is really about, again, trying to be that defined space and process about working through conflict. So that's what we really try to make that committee, that space. And then we also really try to help folks get engaged with their local union and activities and issues, and again, try to make that a two-way street as much as possible. So I'm almost done here because I want to open it up for everybody, but as many of you guys know, every other year we have what we call the Union Co-op Symposium. And this is a big national symposium where we bring in folks from Mondragon. We usually have labor folks from all over the country, folks who are doing co-op development all over the country. But it's about 2 days of really trying to just get to the best practices around how to create a union co-op movement and good union co-ops. So I'll invite all of you guys to join us in 2023. So you still have about a year and a half, but just put that on your calendar. It'll probably be in November. It should be in November of 2023. And so I think, yes, those are all my slides. And I would love to answer any questions or talk about any of this stuff if you would like to know.
That was wonderful, Ellen. Thank you. And thank you for working through the COVID issues.
The coughing spell. And I apologize to the interpreters. I sometimes am such a fast talker, so I'm sorry. I've had to do it myself. I sometimes have to interpret. I kick myself because I know. I'm like, why am I doing this? Sorry.
We had a comment from John McNamara saying that symposium that you have extended an invitation is one of his favorite co-op gatherings. So,
no, thank you, John. Mine too.
So I don't see any questions in chat. So why don't we open it up for, and I see John McNamara, he has his hand up.
Sure. Yeah, I just have a comment. So John, for those of you who may not know me, Northwest Co-op Development Center, also on the Union Co-op Council for the U.S. Federation. I guess one thing I've been thinking.
And John, speak slowly for the interpreters.
Sure, sorry about that. Yes, so one of my, I guess it's more of a reflection I've had recently and thinking more about, but also, and maybe you can just comment on it. And I had to step out for a little bit, so you might have even covered it. So if I'm being redundant, just tell me. But one of the things I think is kind of valuable about the union co-op relationship is that for worker co-ops, there are so many policies that like a consumer co-op doesn't necessarily deal with. They just turn over to management. But in worker co-ops, right, the board has to write a lot of things like payroll or personnel policies and stuff. But the union actually really helps streamline that and actually helps the board be able to focus more on the bigger strategic issues, because the collective bargaining agreement really covers a lot of the policy development in a worker co-op through that model, and it actually locks it down so you're not constantly rehashing the same issues month after month.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, you're very, very right. That yeah, you can obviously fashion your collective bargaining agreement, more or less complex, but definitely having a lot of things spelled out in black and white so people know what the policy is about different things is really helpful to have it, and can help avoid, right, a lot of issues that can happen sometimes.
Helen, when you talk about the team, how many people and who is included in that team?
Yeah, so I would say, like, in your startup is kind of who is that initial group of folks that are coming together. It might only be 2 or 3, but who are the folks who are going to really bring that co-op to life? In your team after the co-op is up and running, we really look at the whole, like all of the workers in the business. But so I would say in our team meetings, we, as much as possible, try to include all the workers, because we're really trying to get as many of them as possible to become worker owners. But if we only meet with and if we only train the existing worker owners, the likelihood of other folks joining is going to be a lot lower. So the team is changing, right? It's hopefully growing over time, but that's who we think of when we say the team.
And that team is together. Was it a 3-month process just for the learning, and then it extends out as you're planning the business?
Yeah, so yes, so the initial for CoOp U, if they go through CoOp U, is a 3-month process. We meet for 12 to 14 weeks, and we usually do like 2 to 3 hours a week, and then they have outside, assignments and things that they're supposed to do. But I would say that's mostly for our startups. With the CoOps that we're transitioning, we try to get them started off, almost immediately in team meetings and things like that.
Hi, Ellen. This is Frank Satera.
Hi, Frank.
How are you? I wanted to just ask if you could maybe give any more detail or information about the union community that might be resistant to the idea, and if you've had any experiences.
Yeah, I mean, we've not had any unions that have just been like, no, like we think union co-ops are awful and we're going to fight against you or something like that. We've not had anything like that. I think there's been, there could be times, like, let's just say, for example, you're going to build a grocery co-op and you've got, a co-op that's representing existing grocery workers. Like, you could see where, like, there might be a sense of like, you're going to be competition for that existing grocery. And so that could be potentially an issue there, although hopefully, and I know this is the way my local was they didn't see it as an issue. It was, we represent all grocery workers. And so we want to see more grocery workers. And so we're not concerned about that. But you could see that if the shops that they currently have felt threatened, you could see that. I think more so what we see is that the labor movement is so, underfunded and so under attack that they just either can't, most of the time just don't have the resources to spend time working on union co-ops. Like it's something that's like, oh yeah, that'd be nice, or just don't even have the bandwidth to try and really understand, because they're so busy trying to put out fires and just, defend what they currently have. So I think that's what we've seen more than anything, is that they just don't have the bandwidth to sometimes be a partner, on things.
Matthew,
Now,
I think you had your hand up. Oh,
yeah, no, go ahead.
Matthew.
Hey, Ellen.
Hey.
I was really great presentation. Thank you. I was tantalized by, your mention of spending so long with Siolon coming in to do trainings with you. I was curious if you could dive a little bit more into like some of the insights that they had shared with you.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of woven in, throughout the course. But I think, one of the biggest things that they talk about, and, again, is just the importance of the people, right? The team that's bringing it to life, that you could have the best business idea. You could have all the financing in the world, but that the team, those people are really the multiplier. They're the ones who are going to really bring it to life. So I think that was definitely something that they hit home a lot. If anybody came to our 2015 Union CoOp Symposium, you probably met Armin, who was one of the one of the initial founders of Mondragon. But I love his imagery that he uses about like how a co-op comes to life and starts off as a gas, and then as you get more and more clear about the ideas and whatnot, it becomes a liquid, and then you keep working on it and testing it and making it stronger, it becomes a solid. So things like that, like those types of concepts. And I think some of their great things around like building the road as you go and just really being about getting out there and trying things out. But different pieces like that I think were really key about how they incorporate that into the curriculum. So. And I was only going to mention, just one other thought on what Frank had asked earlier. I think the other place that people need to be careful about, and where we've seen some issues in terms of there being some animosity between unions and co-op developers, are when a co-op developer might be working with a company, but maybe either not realize that the company is already union, or maybe not engage the union enough. So this is, I'm talking about in terms of converting existing businesses to worker ownership. Because what has happened in some instances is that company or could come off as like that it's almost like an anti-union or a union busting attempt. That we're going to form a co-op, and then the labor partner might not understand, or it might be the actual intention is to get rid of that union. They might think that that's what's going on. That we're going to turn you all into owners, and there's no longer going to be a union. So I would just say that I think it's really important for co-op developers to, definitely, if you're going to convert existing businesses, make sure you know whether or not that business is union. And then make sure you very, very early on are going and talking to that labor partner, and actually to that labor partner, not just the workers who are in the union, but the actual representative for that labor partner, so that there's a clear understanding that this is, not about trying to get rid of the union in there. And I would think it would also just be important to make sure you have a clear conversation with the owner to make sure that they're clear that, if this transition to worker ownership, that doesn't mean that the union just disappears. So that'd be just a little cautionary thing I would say as well.
Cool. Thanks so much, Ellen, for this presentation and for doing it while sick. I hope you get some good rest after
I am
this.
feeling much better. You probably can't tell from all the coughing, but I'm feeling much better.
I'm glad. Yeah, I mean, this is just such an amazing presentation, and having come into the worker co-op ecosystem on a national level right before the pandemic started. I haven't been able to come to Cincinnati, haven't been able to meet a lot of folks in real life or like visit around at other union co-ops, but I'm curious, having been through this contract process with a couple different co-ops and also different unions, if there are sort of common sticking points that come up that are sort of unique to the situation in bargaining, like whether just like there are particularly challenging pieces to navigate just because of the logistics of a worker co-op and that unique situation, and if like both from the negotiation perspective, but also just from like explaining or having the union be on the page that they need to be to work on co-op level and not like boss worker antagonistic relationship level.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we've been lucky, and we've obviously done a lot of groundwork for a long time. So we haven't really had a labor partner who's just clueless of like what it is we're creating. So we haven't had to, have like that, I guess, that fundamental of a conversation for a long time. I'm trying to think if we've also been very, lucky that, so, by including, some of our labor partners on our board, by, having them be around this a whole lot, they also understand like kind of where our businesses are at in terms of like financially, like, is it feasible for them to actually pay into that health and welfare fund? Like you might see that typically a union would be like, well, no, there has to be, like, this is what's, typically in the industry is this healthcare piece, and that we are typically making at minimum this wage. But our partners have definitely, like, they've been hearing about how the businesses are doing on a pretty regular basis. And so, and we come in with open books, right? So we show them like, this is what we're thinking, this is why. And it's not just like, they're saying, we want $3 more an hour. And we're saying, well, we're only going to give you 25 cents. Like it's just an open conversation, right? So yeah, so I'd say like that, we've not had issues around that so much per se. I mean, and I think on our end, we understand that like things that they would typically want in a contract, like, so we're in a not right to work state, which means, once the workers democratically decide they want a union, every worker who joins has to join the union. So we don't, our co-ops don't fight for the, like, against those provisions of like, close shop or things that would be real sticky points, or dues check off, things like that. So yeah, I would say in general, they've been really just like helpful around us, trying to make sure, one, we understand what's going on in the industry, and like, our labor contracts have been flexible enough that, it's not hamstringing the co-op in any way that would be, a real challenge. Thank you for that question. That was a good question.
There is another question in the chat, and it asks for the startups, the startup co-ops that you're working with, that as with many startups, there are limited funding and limited funds for startup services. How is CoOp Cincy able to accomplish this with some of the groups that you work with for the startups?
Yeah, startups are so hard for so many reasons. I mean, we've definitely capitalized our co-ops in every way imaginable, but I would say that what's really been great in the past several years is that we've, been a member of the Seed Commons, which is a national financial cooperative. And that's allowed us to tap into nationally raised dollars, but also raise some of our own funds locally. So we've been able to get some grants from some local churches and nonprofits to just have access to more flexible startup capital. So I think those two pieces, I think, have been the most impactful in terms of trying to raise working capital. And then I think the other thing, we've just gotten smarter about how to help guide groups to, again, start off with that minimum viable product. So I think sometimes we used to have really ginormous grand plans with some of our startups, like, we need to raise $500,000 or whatnot to get something started. And so we've been able to kind of as we've learned, be able to help folks figure out, okay, what's the smallest, most viable way we could start, get that going, and then keep iterating. So I think that combination has been helpful.
Another question that I have from, co-op development geeky side. I see that in the co-op Cincy, you've got a number of co-ops in a number of different industries. Would you ever form multiple co-ops in the same industry, or would you have one co-op getting larger?
Yeah, so within our co-op network, we have like an agreement that they all sign that they won't get into directly competing against each other. And that they'll first, before we'd even let another group in, like that co-op that's already in that sector would need to, like, together as a part of the network, like we'd have to approve them coming in and make sure it was not like a direct competition. But I think it depends on the business. So like for childcare, for example, like we might have one childcare center in one part of town, but it would be totally not a problem to have another childcare center in another part of town. But it might be if we were, Sustainerd is getting into solar, like it probably wouldn't make sense to bring another residential solar company, directly in to the network like that. But it might make sense for Sustainerd to acquire them or something like that, or merge in some way. So I think it depends. I mean, we're definitely looking at building out sectors. So like that's part of our conversions plan is we kind of have an acquisition program. And so we're going out right now in construction, for example, and trying to build a portfolio of like residential construction companies, so that they will be able to kind of build off of each other, but not compete with each other directly. So for example, we'll have Sustainerd that does, residential insulation and solar, and we might have a roofing company that does roofing and windows, something like that.
Yeah, thank you. Matthew asked a good question in the chat. Matthew, why don't you just open up your mic?
Sounds good. Yeah, Ellen, I was curious. So for CoOp U, I know you kind of mentioned that over time you've gone more from startup to conversion. Has it also kind of coincided with like a large changing in the curriculum and like the experience that they have going through CoOp U if there are startups versus conversions?
Well, I would say we still do startups. Like we definitely still do startups. CoOp U is mostly geared towards startups. It can also work towards conversions if they're going to try to start like a new product line or something like that. Because it's really about creating a business plan. What I would say with the conversions, that's our business legacy fund program. And we do, we work with them very specifically, like we do help them make sure that they have a clear business plan and a clear transitions plan, but they don't usually go through the CoOp U. So we do keep them somewhat separate.
I have another question, and I'm just so thankful that you're here, Ellen, to answer these questions. I was working in a sector, the paper mill industry, and we ran into a situation where one of the unions was quite concerned about worker co-ops or a multi-stakeholder co-op being confused with an ESOP, and that particular union had a bad experience with an ESOP. Any suggestions for how to, well, first of all, your experience with what you have heard about unions and their experience with ESOPs, and then how to come to a mutual understanding.
Yeah, no, there's definitely been a lot of experience within the labor movement to have like bad experiences with ESOPs. And that, ESOPs, the employee stock ownership plans, that's often because they would be used as a way to essentially like they would use the pension of the workers to create the ESOP. And then oftentimes they were bad deals and these businesses wouldn't do well, and they would essentially just drain all the capital that the workers had actually accumulated, all the wealth that they'd accumulated over time. So they have good reason, right, to have a lot of concern when they hear ESOPs, because that happened many, many times. What I would say in terms of trying to deal with that, I mean, we definitely we will do both worker co-ops and democratic ESOPs. We haven't done a democratic ESOP, yet. But I think we just try to make sure that our labor partners really understand, that there's ESOPs, just the difference around their structure, that there's ESOPs that can pretty much act as a typical company, that it might be about profit sharing, but it all just depends on how strong that business and that business's financials are, and that it's really unfortunate that those things happen. And there's, and there are many cases where ESOP doesn't make sense, and just the ways that we try to, keep those types of things from happening. But I would say, most of the time we're talking about worker co-ops. And so we talk about the fact that this is not a retirement plan. This is a way of governing the business, and really try to relate it to, it's like within a labor, the labor movement, you're trying to make sure that your workers have as much control, as much power as possible. And so this is, kind of taking that, union contract hopefully to like a whole nother level, right? Where it's like, not only do you have control of your wages, benefits, and working conditions, but actually hopefully you have control over that whole business itself, right? And you're truly able to build wealth that way. So just trying to go back to the basics about what is a worker co-op. This is about governance and about truly giving workers the control, and pointing out some of the differences, but also recognizing that they have a founded concern there. So
Thank you. Matthew, you have another good question. Go ahead.
Thanks, Margaret. Yeah, so I'm curious. I mean, you've mentioned very clearly about like the ways that you've kind of been very proactive to teach union history as well as co-op history. Do you find that that's like the labor partners are also interested in taking that piece up as well and kind of teaching their membership more about co-ops? And has that kind of thereby then connected into more conversion opportunity because they've got such a broad reach of folks who are now hearing about co-ops?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely, there's still tons of room for deepening the partnership. I mean, there has been times where education has happened like that, but it's not like a regular occurrence in Cincinnati. So I think, we currently actually have a subcommittee right now that's working on how do we deepen the relationship between, our labor movement and our co-ops here in Cincinnati. But I think something like that is, wonderful. And we would love to see, right, that this is part of the education that, like, what I would always say is, for me, as somebody who was an organizing director, was like, this was another tool for me in my tool bag. Like my kind of, what I was tasked with doing was trying to lift up the wages and benefits and working conditions of all these workers in the sector. And so I wanted to have all my tools at my disposal. Sometimes that might be like a fight back, campaign. Sometimes that might be organizing, new workers into the union in a traditional company. But also I felt like it should be proactive, right? That I could be able to go out there and help create businesses in that sector, to help lift up, the standards in the industry. So I think there's a lot of room for the labor movement to do more and to become more integrated into this movement. I mean, I would love to see, you oftentimes in different, labor unions, you have like a fund that they do for political work. They have a fund that they do for organizing. Well, there should be a fund that they do for union co-op development, right? Like in my mind, I feel like this should be another thing that's, we have a department on organizing. We have a department on representation. We should have a department on union co-op, organizing as well. So that's my vision where I'd love to see it go at some point. But we're obviously not quite there yet, so.
Ellen, do you see any, I just am fascinated with this. Do you see any potential industry sectors that are on the horizon that are really have a lot of potential for union co-ops?
Yeah. Well, I think that the work that was been done with the taxi co-ops, I think is really exciting. And they've, been able to organize hundreds of workers, into union co-op taxis and in different places. Also the Maine lobstermen, like they've been able to organize lots and lots of lobstermen into the machinists. I don't know. I feel like if you did have a union truly embrace this on a national level as a part of a national strategic part of their campaign, and you do see some signs of that within like SEIU, for example, in things like childcare. I feel like you could have a really big impact if the union put, lots of resources behind it, like they do with some of their national campaigns. But I do think that, that this can work for any industry, that it's not, there's not like a specific industry that is necessarily better than others.
Thank you. Another question. Another question came in from Debbie. Is there a point in the development process of the co-ops that you consider them to be the business to be fully graduated or fully fledged, or will there always be an association with CoOp Cincy?
Well, definitely for the ones that are in the greater Cincinnati area, we feel like there's real value from being connected together in a network. Our co-ops give back 10% of their net profits to the whole to then be able to go into new co-op development, research and design. I mean, kind of they get to decide where that money goes. And so, we feel like that is really powerful, and we like that's part of how Mondragon has been able to be so transformative in their area of the country. So we always tell them, you're going to be with us for perpetuity, and that's the hope, right? In terms of if they've graduated, we do kind of have in our minds kind of a rubric of kind of where we see our co-ops in terms of their development. But I wouldn't say that I guess I would say that we have within our network, we would say, trying to remember the terminology we use, but we have kind of our full members and then our members that are, I guess, still in process. And so they have to have at least 2 full-time worker owners before they can officially become full voting members of the network. But that's, I think and then they have to, I guess that's the main thing that we judge them on in terms of, are they truly able to kind of, are they functioning as a business and able to join the network at a voting, as a voting member. They can still be a part of the network, but in terms of being a voting member, we require that they have at least 2 full-time worker owners.
Will CoOp Cincy always have a seat on the board of the member co-ops?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is the plan. Yeah, they kind of that person's kind of imbued with the power to make sure that the values, the co-op values, are being followed. And again, it's just that kind of connector to all the things that are going on in the network. And that coach may change. It's not always necessarily the same person, but it is somebody from the organization or somebody that we kind of appoint to. We've got a whole advisory board as well. Explain the network a bit more in relation to the worker model. Yeah, so.
Well, there's a question. Could you explain the network a bit more in relation to the worker model that was presented?
Yeah, so the network, it's definitely kind of,
slow down.
Yeah, it's based off of the kind of Mondragon, of how they've done their network. So each co-op, elects a representative that then right now is put on a committee within CoOp Cincy's board. Eventually, it'll be its own co-op. It'll be its own kind of spin-off co-op of co-ops, where each of the co-ops will, own that organization. And they each give back 10% of their net profits once they're profitable, only $250 if they're not profitable yet. And then they get to decide, where that money goes in terms of, does it go towards our loan fund? Does it go towards supporting the support that we give to existing co-ops? At one point, they had hired a marketing consultant to help them all do a better job with digital marketing. But the network is really there to help provide them, the training, help them build the co-op culture, and keep them, supported and in contact with one another, and help facilitate as much inter-cooperation as possible. And so the members, the workers, are not necessarily members of the network in that sense. I mean, they can come to everything, but the actual voting members are the co-ops themselves, and they, appoint a delegate from each co-op.
More of a federated relationship. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I wanted to read a comment because this is being recorded. And it's from Diane saying, I'm trying to start a home cleaning cooperative in Portland, Oregon, and I'd really love to bring this union co-op vision to the project. I'm looking for all kinds of connections, allies, and mentorship. If anyone would like to connect, and she provided her email. So
Yeah. Well, I would say, is it Quinn? Is that who?
Quinn Diane Thoreau.
Quinn Diane? So I would say you definitely want to connect with the One project. If you haven't already, I think it's the Oregon New Economy Project. Because the folks who have started that are very, very much connected to the network and or to the union co-op movement. And they are, working to create a whole network of union co-ops there. So if you're not connected, email me and I'll put my email in the chat because I'll make sure you get connected.
All right. Principle number 6, cooperation amongst cooperatives and co-op developers.
Totally.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Ellen, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with us?
Well, I'm always interested in what people are working on. So I don't know if people even want to throw in the chat or say anything, but I'm curious, if there's any feedback or what people are working on. And I guess the other thing I would just say is that, this is constantly a work in progress and, we are, there's a lot that we are still working to try and develop and do well. So I think there's a lot of room for growth in this, but I do feel like for many reasons, I think, having a labor committee within your co-op that's truly making sure we're balancing out and living out our ideals, I feel like is really important. So I feel like that's just an awesome thing that this model has brought to the movement for cooperators. And, I think we're constantly trying to work through how do we need to be a part of a broader movement as the co-op movement. And so how to do that well, is just important. And so, yeah, I appreciate you guys all being here today. So.
Very good. This is great. Does anyone want to unmute and share briefly projects that they're working on?
Hey, this is Quinn Diane Thoreau from Portland, Oregon. I'm the person doing the cleaning co-op or attempting to have a small cleaning business going that I started about 6 months ago that was thinking I would eventually convert into a co-op, but I'm thinking I want to bring more people on sooner rather than later because it's a lot of work. I have this kind of vision that I'd like to share real quick of having this cleaning co-op be kind of a vehicle for educating my transgender community about cooperatives while also serving my transgender community and eventually, hopefully, giving all of my friends jobs. And I'm hoping to eventually grow this into a cooperative of cooperatives, kind of primarily by and for trans folks. Not exclusively by any means, but kind of centering transgender folks because we're under a lot of financial duress. A lot of us have been facing poverty for a long time, and a lot of us are under attack in certain states. And so I really want to use, cooperative models to build up our wealth and well-being and liberation. So I guess I wanted to say all that and share that real quick. And I really would love to connect with other folks who share this because I know this is kind of like a niche within a niche within a niche of a vision. So I'm just looking for my people out there, okay? So thank you so much.
Awesome. Love your vision and totally need to connect you to the Oregon folks because I think they will love it too. And I think you're right. This is such hard work that you want to have a team. You want to have people around you who are supporting you. But that's awesome. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you for that, Quinn Diane. Matthew, did you want to you put something in the chat?
Oh yeah, I was just sharing a little bit about what I'm up to. Yeah, so I'm founder of the Georgia Cooperative Development Center. So yeah, we're proud members of the CW network. But I also live directly in the co-op space of working at Savvy Cooperative as a business director. So I get to see it from sort of the 30,000 square foot, or foot level, but also like kind of at the ground as well. So really appreciate all this experience, and everything you shared about CoOp U is going to be very helpful for us because we're working on our own co-op academy right now. So very interested actually in purchasing that manual you mentioned.
Cool. Good luck.
Could you tell us what Savvy Co-op is again, Matthew?
Oh, certainly, Margaret. Yes, yeah, Savvy Co-op is it's a multi-stakeholder platform cooperative owned by medical patients, and we facilitate mostly qualitative research, primarily with pharmaceutical companies, but by centering the ownership of patients and the ownership of their data and the ability to receive patronage dividends potentially related to the value of medical data.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's a lot. I'm still fascinated by the platform co-op space, and I see that becoming more of the conversation all the time as well. So yeah, always interested in that one too.
Anyone else? If not, this has been a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much, Ellen, for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you to the Interpreters Cooperative of Madison for the awesome job you do with translation and making this accessible to a wider audience. Thank you. And please, if you want more, our third in the series will be next Friday. And Ellen alluded to it, the toolkit that has been developed for working in the union co-op space. So thank you everyone for joining us, and this will be recorded in both English and Spanish, so look for the recording. Thank you.